Tonight, drift with me into a world of sand, stars and secrets. Long before pharaohs, long before pyramids, when the first whispers of creation rose with the Nile's morning mist, close your eyes, breathe slowly, and let the noise of the day slip far, far away. Because this is the tale of the Egyptian gods, the ancient powers who shaped the skies, ruled the underworld, and brought order from endless chaos. Their stories echo through temple walls and weathered hieroglyphs, waiting for someone willing to hear them in the stillness of night. So lie back, relax, and if you enjoy journeys like this, like the video, and tell us where you're watching from. Now, let the story begin. In the beginning, there was nothing. No earth, no sky, no life. Only none. The infinite primordial ocean. Dark waters stretching forever in all directions, with no surface and no bottom, no beginning and no end. None was not a god in the way we think of gods, not a being with personality or desire. Nun simply was. The waters of potential, of possibility, of everything that could be, but was not yet. Silent, still, eternal, waiting. In those dark waters there was no light, no time, no change. Nothing existed except the potential for existence. The universe slept in Nun's embrace, waiting to be born. But within this nothingness, something stirred. A consciousness began to emerge, like a lotus rising from the depths. This was Atum, whose name means the complete one, or the all. Atum became aware of himself within the darkness. He was alone, utterly, completely alone. In all the infinite waters, there was only himself, and from this loneliness, from this desire for companionship, for otherness, for creation, everything would follow. Atum rose from noon like the sun rising from the ocean. He emerged from the primordial waters and found himself standing on a mound of earth, the very first solid ground, the primeval hill called the Ben. This hill had appeared because something needed something to stand upon. Reality itself was beginning to take shape. Standing on that first hill surrounded by endless water, Atum looked out at the emptiness and knew what he must do. He must create. He must populate this void with other beings, with life, with order. But Atum was alone. There was no other to help him create. So he turned to the only creative power available to him, himself. The ancient Egyptians were not shy about this part of the story. Atum, in his solitude, took himself in hand and brought forth his seed. From this act of self-generation the first two gods were born, Shu and Tefnut, air and moisture, the first pair of opposites, the first division of unity into duality. Shu was air, breath, the space between things. His name means emptiness, or he who rises up. He was the atmosphere, the light, the space that allows for separation and distinction. Tefnut was moisture, the waters that would later become rain and dew. She was the dampness in the air, the water that gives life. Together, Shu and Tefnut represented the first elements needed for life, air to breathe and water to drink. Atum loved his children immediately. They were the first things in all creation that were not himself. They were other, separate, distinct. And so the process of creation had truly begun. Let your breathing slow as the story continues, gentle as the lapping of the Nile against the shore. Shu and Tefnut, the first children, stood with their father Atum on the primeval mound. Around them the waters of Nun still stretched endlessly, but now there were three beings instead of one. The process of creation had begun. But the new gods were curious. They looked out at the vast, dark waters and wondered what lay beyond their small island of existence. So they left the Ben, leaving Atum alone again, and ventured out into Nun to explore. They wandered through the dark waters for a long time, so long that Atum began to worry. Where were his children? Had they been swallowed by the primordial waters? Had they dissolved back into nothingness? Atum, consumed with worry and grief, sent out his eye to search for them. This eye, which would later become one of the most powerful symbols in Egyptian mythology, went forth into the darkness like a tiny sun, searching the waters of Nun. The eye found Shu and Tefnut wandering in the darkness and guided them home. When Atum saw his children returning safely, his relief and joy were so great that he wept. And from the tears of Atum falling onto the earth, the first humans were born. This is the first appearance of humanity in the story, not created deliberately like the gods, but born accidentally from divine emotion, from tears of joy and relief. Humans were, from the beginning, connected to the gods through these tears, sharing in divine emotion, even if not divine power. But the creation story was far from complete. Shu and Tefnut, having been reunited with their father, now turned to each other. As the first pair, the first duality, they came together. And from their union, two more gods were born, Geb and Nut. Geb was the earth itself, solid, fertile, the foundation upon which all life would grow. His body was the ground beneath your feet, the soil of the Nile Valley, the desert sand, the rocks and hills. He was stability, permanence, the physical world. Nut was the sky, vast, arching, infinite. Her body stretched across the heavens covered with stars. She was the dome of heaven, the space above, the realm of the celestial. Each evening she swallowed the sun, and each morning she gave birth to it anew. Geb and Nut loved each other deeply, passionately. They embraced constantly, locked together so tightly that there was no space between earth and sky. They were as one, united, inseparable. But this created a problem. With earth and sky pressed together, there was no room for anything else to exist. No space for life, for movement, for the world to unfold. Atum saw this and knew it could not continue. He commanded Shu, god of air, to separate his children. Shu reluctantly obeyed his father. He placed himself between Geb and Nut and pushed them apart. Geb remained below, the earth. Nut was lifted above, becoming the sky. And between them, Shu held the space of air, of atmosphere, of the realm where life could exist. Imagine it. Geb lying on his back, his body the earth. Nut arched above. Him, her body the sky, held aloft by their father Shu standing between them. This was the Egyptian image of the cosmos. Earth below, sky above, air between, and water, none, still surrounding everything. Geb and Nut mourned their separation. They could see each other but could no longer touch. They called out to each other across the distance Shu maintained between them, but the separation was necessary. Only with this space between earth and sky could creation continue, and continue it did, for Nut was already pregnant with the next generation of gods. Your body is growing heavier now, more relaxed. Let yourself sink deeper into comfort as the divine family grows. Nut, goddess of the sky, carried 5 children within her. But there was a problem, a curse, a prophecy that would shape the destiny of Egypt for all time. Ra, who had emerged as the sun god, the supreme deity, had learned through prophecy that a child of Nut would one day overthrow him. Fearing this, Ra pronounced a curse. Nut would not be able to give birth on any day of the year. The Egyptian calendar, as it existed then, had exactly 360 days, divided into 12 months of 30 days each. Ra's curse covered every single day. Nut was trapped, pregnant forever, unable to deliver her children. But Nut was clever, and she had a friend who was cleverer still. Thoth, god of wisdom, magic, writing, and the moon. Thoth loved Nut and wanted to help her. He devised a plan. He challenged Khonsu, another moon god, to a game of Senet, a board game the Egyptians loved. The stakes were high, pieces of moonlight itself. Thoth was brilliant at Senet, strategic and lucky. He won game after game, and each time he won he claimed a portion of moonlight from Khonsu. Eventually he had won enough moonlight to create 5 additional days, days that existed outside Ra's curse, days that were not part of the official year. These 5 days, called the days upon the year, were added to the calendar, and on these 5 days Nut could give birth. On the first day she gave birth to Osiris. He emerged wrapped in darkness, but a voice rang out across creation. The Lord of all the earth is born. Osiris would become the god of civilization, agriculture, resurrection, and life after death. On the second day, Horus the Elder was born, not the famous Horus who would come later, but an earlier form of the falcon god, associated with the sky and kingship. On the third day, Set was born. He tore violently from his mother's side rather than being born normally. Set would become the god of chaos, storms, the desert, violence, and foreigners. He was red-haired and fierce, powerful but dangerous. On the fourth day, Isis was born. She came quietly, peacefully. Isis would become the greatest goddess of Egypt, goddess of magic, motherhood, healing, and wisdom. Her love and devotion would save the world itself. On the fifth day, Nephthys was born. She was quieter than her siblings, more mysterious. She would become goddess of mourning, the night, and service to the dead. These 5, Osiris, Horus the Elder, Set, Isis, and Nephthys, were the last of the first generation of gods. The Ennead of Heliopolis, the 9 great gods, was now complete. Atum, Shu, Tefnut, Geb, Nut, Osiris, Set, Isis, and Nephthys, with Horus the Elder sometimes included or counted separately. The gods were born, and now they would establish the order of the world. But first, they needed to form relationships, to pair off, to establish the divine family structures that would govern creation. Osiris, the firstborn, was wise and good. He married his sister Isis, who was equally wise, and even more devoted. They loved each other deeply, purely. Together they would rule as king and queen. Set married Nephthys, his sister, but their relationship was not as harmonious. Set was violent and jealous, Nephthys gentle and loyal. They were mismatched from the beginning. The stage was set for the greatest drama in Egyptian mythology, a story of love and betrayal, death and resurrection that would define Egyptian religion for 3,000 years. Breathe slowly now, deeply. The family of gods is complete. The story grows more intense, but your body grows more relaxed. Before the tragedy came, there was a golden age. Osiris and Isis ruled over the earth, and under their reign humanity flourished. Osiris was the perfect king. He taught humans how to grow crops, how to plant wheat and barley, how to harvest and store grain. Before Osiris, humans had been nomadic, wandering, struggling to survive. Osiris gave them agriculture, and with agriculture came civilization. He taught them to make bread and beer, the staples of Egyptian life. He showed them how to build irrigation canals to carry the Nile's waters to distant fields. He established laws, ensuring justice and order. He introduced religion, teaching humans how to honour the gods properly. Under Osiris's rule, Egypt, and by extension the world, was peaceful and prosperous. The Nile flooded at the right time each year, depositing rich black soil on the fields. Crops grew abundantly. People had enough to eat. There was no war, no crime, no suffering. Isis stood beside her husband, equal in power and wisdom. She was a magician, the greatest who had ever lived. She knew the secret names of things, the words of power that could command reality itself. She used her magic to heal the sick, protect the innocent, and maintain the cosmic order called Me'at. Me'at was the fundamental principle of Egyptian thought: truth, justice, balance, order, harmony, law. Me'at was both a concept and a goddess, the daughter of Ra. Everything in creation was meant to support Me'at, to maintain cosmic balance. Osiris and Isis were perfect embodiments of Me'at. The people loved Osiris and Isis. They built temples in their honour, made offerings, sang praises. The divine couple walked among mortals, teaching and guiding. Heaven and earth were connected, harmonious. But not everyone was happy with this golden age. Set, the red-haired god of chaos, watched his brother's success with growing resentment. Set was powerful, perhaps as powerful as Osiris, but he was not loved. People feared him. They associated him with the desert, harsh, dry, hostile, while Osiris was associated with the fertile Nile Valley. Set was god of storms, of foreign lands, of violence and disorder. These were necessary forces. Egypt needed storm sometimes, needed to defend against foreigners, needed strength and ferocity. But Set's gifts were not gentle or beloved, and Set was jealous. Why should Osiris be king? Why should he be praised and loved while Set was feared and avoided? Set had been born only days after Osiris. The order of their birth was almost arbitrary, yet it determined everything. The jealousy grew in Set's heart like a cancer. It consumed him, transformed him, made him capable of the unthinkable. Set began to plot his brother's murder. Let your mind drift now, peaceful despite the darkness entering the story. You're safe, warm, comfortable. Set's plan was cunning. He would not attack Osiris openly. His brother was well guarded, beloved, protected by powerful magic. Instead, Set would use deception. Set secretly measured his brother's body while Osiris slept, taking exact dimensions. Then he commissioned craftsmen to build a beautiful chest, a sarcophagus, decorated with precious materials, inlaid with gold and jewels. It was the most magnificent chest ever created, and it was made precisely to Osiris's measurements. Set held a great feast and invited Osiris and many other guests. The celebration was lavish, with food and beer flowing freely. Entertainment filled the evening. Everyone was relaxed, happy, unsuspecting. At the height of the festivities, Set brought out the magnificent chest and announced a game. Whoever fits perfectly inside this chest, he declared, may keep it as a gift. The guests, enchanted by the beautiful chest, eagerly tried to fit inside, but Set had made sure none of them would fit properly. Some were too tall, others too wide, others too short. Finally, Osiris tried. He lay down inside the chest, and of course, he fit perfectly. It had been made for him. The moment Osiris was inside, Set's accomplices rushed forward. They slammed the lid shut, nailed it closed, and sealed it with molten lead. Osiris was trapped inside, unable to escape, unable to breathe. Set and his followers took the sealed chest to the Nile and threw it in. The current carried it away, carrying the dying god toward the sea. Osiris, the good king, the bringer of civilization, the beloved of all, was murdered by his own brother, sealed in darkness, drowned in the river he had made fertile and life-giving. When Isis learned what had happened, her grief shook the heavens. She tore her clothes, cut her hair, covered herself in dust. She wept with such anguish that the Nile itself rose in sympathy, flooding its banks. But Isis was not only grief-stricken, she was determined. She would find her husband's body. She would not let him remain lost in the waters. She would bring him home, even if she had to search the entire world. So Isis began her quest. She travelled the length of Egypt, searching along the Nile's banks, asking everyone she met if they'd seen a sealed chest floating in the water. She walked through villages and cities, through marshland and desert, never resting, never giving up. The chest had indeed floated down the Nile, all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. From there, the currents carried it north to the coast of Byblos, in what is now Lebanon. At Byblos, a miracle occurred. The chest washed ashore and came to rest against a small tamarisk tree. And the tree, sensing the divine presence within the chest, began to grow. It grew rapidly, magnificently, until it was the largest, most beautiful tree in the region. As it grew, It enclosed the chest completely within its trunk. The king of Byblos saw this magnificent tree and ordered it cut down to serve as a pillar in his palace. So Osiris, dead and sealed in his chest, was now trapped inside a pillar in a foreign land in a palace where no one knew what they possessed. But Isis, through her magic and determination, discovered where Osiris had ended up. She travelled to Byblos and found work in the king's palace as a nursemaid to the queen's infant son. Isis loved this child as she would have loved her own. Each night she placed him in the fire, not to harm him, but to burn away his mortal parts, to make him immortal. While the child was in the flames, Isis transformed into a swallow and flew around the pillar, mourning her lost husband. One night, the queen discovered what was happening. She saw her child in the fire and screamed, pulling him from the flames. This broke the spell. The child would remain mortal now. Isis revealed her true identity as a goddess. The king and queen were terrified and awed. They begged her forgiveness and asked what they could do to make amends. "Give me the pillar," Isis said. They did so immediately. Isis cut open the pillar, removed the chest, and finally held her husband again. She opened the chest and looked upon Osiris's dead face, and her tears fell upon him like rain. She brought Osiris's body back to Egypt, hiding it in the marshes of the Nile Delta, while she prepared the proper rituals for burial. But the story was not over. Set was still out there, and he would not let his brother rest, even in death. Your eyelids are heavy now. Let them close. Let the story continue as you drift towards sleep. Set was hunting in the marshes one night, hunting by moonlight as he often did, and by terrible chance, or perhaps by fate, he came upon the place where Isis had hidden Osiris's body. When Set saw his brother's corpse, rage consumed him. He had killed Osiris once, but Isis had found him. She would try to bring him back, Set was certain. He could not allow that. So Set tore his brother's body apart. He dismembered Osiris, cutting him into 14 pieces, or 42 pieces, depending on which version of the myth is told. Then Set scattered these pieces across all of Egypt, from the delta to the southern border, throwing them into the Nile so they would be lost forever. When Isis returned and found her husband's body gone, she understood what had happened. Her grief was beyond measure. But again, she did not surrender to despair. Instead, she began a new search, this time for all the pieces of Osiris's body. Nephthys, Set's wife, joined her. Nephthys had been horrified by her husband's cruelty. She loved her sister Isis and had respected Osiris. Together, the two sisters travelled the length of Egypt, searching for the scattered pieces. They travelled in a sacred boat, a papyrus bark, floating down the Nile. Everywhere they went, they asked for help, and the people of Egypt, who had loved Osiris, helped them search. One by one, the pieces were found. Each time Isis and Nephthys recovered a piece, they would hold a ceremony, building a shrine to mark the spot. This is why, in later times, many cities in Egypt claimed to be the burial place of Osiris. Each had received one piece. Each had been blessed by the presence of the mourning goddesses, but one piece was never found. The phallus of Osiris had been thrown into the Nile and eaten by fish, the Oxyrhynchus, the Lepidotus, and the Phagros. These fish became sacred and forbidden to eat in certain regions because they had consumed part of the god. Finally, Isis and Nephthys had recovered all the pieces they could find. Now came the most important work, bringing Osiris back to life. Isis was the greatest magician who had ever lived, but even she could not fully restore life to one who had been so thoroughly killed. She needed help. She called upon Anubis, the jackal-headed god who had become the master of embalming. Anubis was, according to some stories, the son of Osiris and Nephthys, born from a brief union before Osiris married Isis. He had knowledge of death and preservation that even Isis did not possess. Together, Isis and Anubis performed the first mummification. They carefully reassembled Osiris's body placing each piece in its proper position. For the missing piece, Isis used her magic to fashion a replacement from gold. They washed the body with sacred water from the Nile. They anointed it with oils and perfumes. They wrapped it in linen bandages, chanting spells of protection and power. Anubis performed the rituals that would preserve the body for eternity, but Osiris was still dead. His body was preserved, but his spirit had descended to the Duat, the underworld, the realm of the dead. Isis would not accept this. She transformed herself into a kite, a bird of prey, and hovered over Osiris's body. She beat her wings, creating a wind, the breath of life itself. She sang incantations, words of power that echoed through the realms of the living and the dead, and slowly, miraculously, Osiris began to stir. His eyes opened, his breath returned. Life, or something like life, flowed back into his reassembled body. But this was not the same life Osiris had known before. He was changed, transformed. He could not return to the land of the living, could not resume his reign as king of Egypt. He had crossed too far into death's realm. He belonged now to the underworld. Yet in this moment of resurrection, before Osiris descended permanently to the Duat, Isis conceived a child with him. Through her magic and their love, life was created even from death. This child would be Horus, the Avenger, the one who would set things right. Osiris, knowing he could not stay, accepted his new role. He would become king of the underworld, ruler of the dead, judge of souls. Every Egyptian who died would come before Osiris to be judged, to have their heart weighed against the feather of Maat. Those who had lived good lives would be welcomed into the eternal paradise of the Field of Reeds. Those who had lived evil lives would be devoured by Amit, the Soul Eater. In this way, death itself was transformed. It was no longer an ending, but a transition. Osiris showed that resurrection was possible, that life after death existed. He became the god of eternal life, the promise that death could be overcome. But Isis remained in the world of the living, alone, pregnant, and in danger. Let yourself relax completely now. Feel the story washing over you like the Nile at flood time, gentle and powerful. Isis knew she was in danger. Set now ruled Egypt as king, having seized the throne after murdering Osiris. If Set discovered that Isis was pregnant with Osiris's heir, he would kill both her and the child, so Isis fled. She went into hiding in the marshes of the delta, the papyrus swamps where the Nile spreads into countless channels before meeting the sea. It was a wild place, difficult to navigate, easy to hide in. There, with only Nephthys and a few loyal helpers, Isis gave birth to her son. She named him Horus, which means the distant one, or the one on high. He was born in secret, hidden from Set, protected by his mother's powerful magic. Isis raised Horus in the marshes, teaching him, protecting him, preparing him. She knew that one day he would have to face Set, would have to reclaim his father's throne. But first he needed to grow strong. The childhood of Horus was not easy. The marshes were dangerous, full of crocodiles, hippopotamuses, snakes and scorpions. Isis used all her magic to protect her son, but even she could not prevent every danger. One day, Isis had to leave Horus alone while she went to beg for food in a nearby village. When she returned, she found Horus lying motionless, his skin pale, foam at his mouth. A scorpion had stung him. The poison was spreading through his small body. Her son was dying. Isis's scream of anguish echoed across the marshes. She had lost her husband, had barely escaped Set's murderous jealousy, and now her son, the last hope of Egypt, was dying from a scorpion's sting. She cried out to the heavens for help. Her anguish was so great that Ra himself heard it from his solar bark in the sky. Ra stopped the sun in its course. The entire world paused and sent Thoth, god of wisdom and magic, to help. Thoth descended to the marshes. He knew every spell, every incantation. every magical formula. He spoke words of power over the dying child, commanding the poison to leave Horus's body, threatening the scorpion and its kind with divine retribution if the child died. And the magic worked. The poison retreated. Horus's colour returned. He gasped and began breathing normally. He would live. Ra resumed his journey across the sky. Time moved forward again, and Isis held her son close, grateful beyond words. Horus grew strong and clever, raised by the greatest magician and taught by the wisest gods. He learned to fight, to hunt, to lead. He learned magic from his mother. He learned wisdom from Thoth. He learned about justice from his father Osiris, whom he could visit in the underworld. Most importantly, he learned about his birthright. He was the son of Osiris, the true heir to the throne of Egypt. Set was a usurper, a murderer. One day, Horus would challenge him. One day, he would avenge his father and reclaim what was rightfully his. When Horus reached manhood, strong and wise and ready, he emerged from the marshes. It was time to confront Set. You are drifting deeper now. Peaceful even as the story moves toward conflict, your body knows it is safe, let go. The conflict between Horus and Set, called the Contendings, lasted for 80 years. It was a divine legal battle, a physical conflict, and a test of worthiness all at once. Horus came before the Ennead, the Council of Gods, and stated his claim, "I am the son of Osiris. The throne of Egypt is mine by right. Set has usurped it through murder and treachery." Set responded, "I am the strongest of the gods. I defend Ra's solar bark every night from the serpent Apophis, the embodiment of chaos. I have held Egypt secure since Osiris's death. Strength and power determine kingship, not mere inheritance." The gods were divided. Some supported Horus, seeing justice in his claim. Others supported Set, valuing strength and the service Set provided to Ra. Ra himself was uncertain. He was growing old, the sun god whose daily journey across the sky and nightly journey through the underworld exhausted him. He needed Set's strength to protect him from Apophis. Could Horus provide the same protection? The gods decided there would be contests to determine who was worthier. The first contest was a race in stone boats. Each god would build a boat and race down the Nile. Horus cleverly built his boat from wood covered in plaster, painted to look like stone. Set actually built his boat from stone. When the race began, Set's boat immediately sank. Horus won, but Set claimed Horus had cheated by not using real stone. The contest continued. They fought in various animal forms, as hippopotamuses wrestling in the Nile, as men in hand-to-hand combat. The battles were fierce and often inconclusive. In one particularly dark episode, Set violated Horus while he slept, an act of domination and humiliation. But Horus was clever. He caught Set's seed and threw it into the marshes. Then, with Isis's help, he spread his own seed on lettuce that Set loved to eat. When Set unknowingly consumed it, Horus's seed entered his body. Later, in the assembly of gods, Set boasted that he had humiliated Horus and was therefore superior. But when the gods called forth the seed of Set, it answered from the marshes where Horus had thrown it. When they called forth the seed of Horus, it answered from within Set himself. A golden disc emerged from Set's forehead, which Thoth took and made into a crown. Set was humiliated, but still the contest continued. The battles grew more intense. In one fight, Set tore out one of Horus's eyes, the famous Eye of Horus, which became one of the most powerful symbols in Egyptian magic. Thoth restored the eye, making it whole again. In another battle, Horus castrated Set, taking from him his power and virility. The gods grew weary of the endless fighting. They wanted a resolution, but neither Ra nor the full council could agree on who should rule. Finally, the gods did something unprecedented. They wrote a letter to the underworld, to Osiris himself, asking for his judgment. Osiris, from his throne in the realm of the dead, wrote back with divine authority. His letter was stern and clear. Why should my son, the legitimate heir, be deprived of his birthright? I ruled justly and brought civilization to Egypt. Set murdered me through treachery. Justice demands that Horus be recognized as king. Moreover, Osiris reminded the gods that he controlled the grain. The staff of life came from the underworld. From the cycle of death and rebirth he now ruled. Without his blessing, even the gods would starve. This argument was compelling. Additionally, Osiris pointed out that every soul that died came to him for judgment. He held power over death, over eternity, over the ultimate fate of every being. Even Ra would one day grow old and die, and then Osiris would judge him. Faced with Osiris's authority and reasoning, the gods finally reached a decision. Horus would be king of Egypt, ruler of the living world. He was crowned with the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, given the crook and flail, the symbols of kingship. But what of Set? He was too powerful, too necessary to simply punish or imprison. Set had his role to play in the cosmic order. Ra, grateful for Set's service in defending his solar bark, declared, "Set will remain with me in the sky. Each night as I journey through the underworld, Set will stand at the prow of my boat and fight off Apophis, the chaos serpent who seeks to devour me and end creation itself. Set's strength and ferocity will protect us all from the return of chaos." So Set was given honour, not kingship, but an essential role. He became the god of storms, the voice of thunder, Ra's defender against chaos. His violence and chaos, properly directed, served to protect order rather than destroy it. Horus ruled Egypt as the living king. Every pharaoh who followed would be considered a living Horus, an incarnation of the god, ruling with divine authority. And Osiris ruled the underworld, judging the dead, offering them resurrection and eternal life if they had lived justly. The cosmic order was restored. Ma'at was re-established. Creation could continue in balance. Feel peace washing over you now, as order emerges from chaos in the story. Your breathing is slow and steady. With the cosmic order established, we can now explore the fuller pantheon of Egyptian gods. For Horus, Osiris, Isis, and Set were not the only deities the Egyptians worshipped. Egypt was a long, narrow country, stretching along the Nile for hundreds of miles, and each region, each city, had its own local gods who were later incorporated into the broader mythology. Ra, the sun god. Ra was the sun itself, travelling across the sky each day in his solar bark. He was called by many names: Ra, Re, Atum-Ra, Ra-Hohakti. He was the creator in some traditions, emerging from the primordial waters or creating himself. Each morning, Ra was born anew from Nut's body as she gave birth to the sun. He travelled across the sky all day as a mature god, growing old by sunset. Each evening Nut swallowed him, and he journeyed through her body, which was also the underworld, emerging again at dawn, young and renewed. But the underworld journey was perilous. Each night Rhea's boat had to pass through 12 gates, one for each hour of the night. At each gate demons and monsters waited, and most dangerous of all was Apophis, the great serpent of chaos, who tried each night to swallow Ra and end creation. This is where Set proved valuable. Standing at the prow of the solar bark, Set fought Apophis with his great strength, driving the serpent back, ensuring Ra completed his journey and rose again each dawn. Thoth, god of wisdom. Thoth was the ibis-headed god, patron of scribes, keeper of divine knowledge, master of magic and medicine. He invented writing, giving humanity the ability to record knowledge and communicate across time. He was the vizier of Ra, the one who recorded divine judgments, who mediated disputes, who kept the cosmic accounts. Thoth knew every spell, every incantation. He had helped restore Horus's eye, had helped Isis resurrect Osiris, had won moonlight from Khonsu to create the 5 extra days. He was associated with the moon because, like the moon, he measured time and illuminated darkness with knowledge. Hathor, goddess of joy. Hathor was the cow goddess, associated with music, dance, love, beauty and joy. She was the embodiment of feminine power in its nurturing celebratory aspect. Her temples were filled with music and dancing. She was called the Lady of Drunkenness, for she presided over festivals where beer and wine flowed freely. But Hathor had a fierce side. In one famous myth, Ra grew angry with humanity for their disrespect. He sent Hathor to punish them. She transformed into Sekhmet, a lion-headed goddess of war and vengeance, and began slaughtering humans. She became drunk on blood, unable to stop killing. Ra regretted his command and wanted to stop the slaughter. But Sekhmet could not be stopped by force, so Ra devised a trick. He had 7,000 jars of beer mixed with red dye to look like blood, and he poured it out in Sekhmet's path. She drank it, thinking it was blood, and became so drunk that she fell asleep. When she woke, she was Hathor again, gentle and joyful. Ptah, the divine craftsman, Ptah was the creator god of Memphis, patron of craftsmen and architects. Unlike other creator gods who made things physically, Ptah created through thought and speech. He conceived of creation in his heart and spoke it into existence through his tongue. This sophisticated theology, creation through intellectual conception and utterance, made Ptah especially important to artisans and philosophers. Bastet, the cat goddess Bastet, was depicted as a cat or a woman with a cat's head. She was a goddess of home, fertility, and protection, especially protective of children. Cats were sacred to her, and killing a cat in Egypt was a serious crime. She represented the protective, nurturing aspects of feline nature, fierce in defence of her young, but gentle and affectionate in peace. Anubis, lord of the dead. Anubis, with his jackal head, was the god of mummification and the guardian of tombs. He guided souls through the underworld and presided over the weighing of the heart ceremony. He was often depicted standing beside the scales, ensuring accurate judgment. Jackals were associated with death because they were scavengers seen in cemeteries. But Anubis transformed this association. He became the protector of the dead, ensuring their bodies were preserved and their journey to the afterlife was safe. Sobek, the crocodile god. Sobek was worshipped in the Nile region, especially where crocodiles were common. He was both feared and revered. Crocodiles were dangerous, but they were also symbols of pharaonic power and strength. Sobek's temples kept sacred crocodiles that were pampered and adorned with jewellery. Bes, protector of households. Bes was unusual among Egyptian gods. He was depicted as a dwarf with lion features, bow-legged and often sticking out his tongue. He was not majestic or dignified, but he was deeply loved. Bes protected households, especially mothers and children during childbirth. He warded off evil spirits with his fierce appearance and his rattle. Bes was a god of the common people, appearing in homes rather than great temples. There were hundreds more gods. Khnum, the ram-headed potter who shaped humans on his wheel. Nekbet and Wadjet, the vulture and cobra goddesses of Upper and Lower Egypt. Montu, the falcon-headed war god. Serket, the scorpion goddess, and countless local deities who protected specific towns and regions. The Egyptian pantheon was vast, complex, overlapping. Gods merged with each other, were called by multiple names, had different forms in different regions. This flexibility was part of Egyptian religion. It evolved, adapted, incorporated new ideas while maintaining ancient traditions. You're so relaxed now, drifting on the ancient river of story. Let yourself float further into sleep. We've already heard how humans were created from Ra's tears, but the Egyptians, like many ancient peoples, had multiple creation stories, each offering a different perspective on the same fundamental questions. The Khnum tradition. In the city of Elephantine, at the southern border of Egypt where the Nile cataracts rushed powerfully, The ram-headed god Khnum was worshipped as creator. Khnum was a potter, and he fashioned each human being individually on his potter's wheel. He shaped the body from clay, carefully crafting each detail. Then he shaped the ka, the vital force, the spiritual double that every person possessed. When a child was conceived, Khnum formed both the physical body and the spiritual essence, determining the child's fate, talents, and lifespan. This tradition emphasized the individual nature of each person. Each was a unique creation, formed by divine hands, given specific qualities and purposes. The Memphite tradition. In Memphis, as mentioned earlier, Ptah created through thought and word, but in this tradition, humans were created when Ptah conceived of them in his heart and spoke them into existence. This intellectual, almost philosophical approach to creation elevated humanity. We were products of divine thought, manifestations of divine ideas. The Heliopolitan tradition. In the tradition of Heliopolis, humans emerge from various divine acts, from tears, as we've discussed, but also from sweat, from saliva, from various divine fluids. This might seem undignified to modern ears, but for the Egyptians it emphasized our connection to the divine. We carried within us actual divine substance, making us sacred despite our mortality. The purpose of humanity. Regardless of how humans were created, the Egyptian texts were clear about why we existed: to serve the gods. But this service was not slavery. It was a relationship of mutual benefit. Humans built temples where the gods could dwell, made offerings of food and drink that sustained the gods' ka, performed rituals that maintained Ma'at and kept chaos at bay. In return, the gods protected humanity, ensured the Nile flooded appropriately, granted good harvests, provided order and justice. The king, the pharaoh, was the intermediary between gods and humans. He was the living Horus, divine himself, responsible for maintaining Ma'at through his rule. Every morning in temples across Egypt, priests would perform rituals of awakening the god, feeding the god, clothing the god, all enacted through the god's cult statue. The pharaoh, in theory, performed all these rituals, though in practice priests acted on his behalf. This system created a cosmic order where everyone and everything had their place. The gods in heaven and in temples, the pharaoh as divine king, priests as servants of the gods, the common people working to support the system, and all of it sustained by the annual flooding of the Nile, itself a divine gift. The tears of Isis mourning Osiris, the blessings of Hapi, the god of the inundation. When the system functioned properly, Egypt prospered. When it broke down, when kings were weak, when Ma'at was violated, when chaos threatened, Egypt suffered. The gods and humans were bound together in maintaining the cosmic order. Your mind is quiet now, still as the Nile on a windless evening. The story continues, but you drift. The Egyptians were famously preoccupied with death and the afterlife, but this wasn't morbid, it was hopeful. The Egyptians believed that death was not an ending but a transition, a doorway to eternal life. When a person died, their soul separated into different components. The Ba was the personality, the individual character that made each person unique. It was often depicted as a human-headed bird that could fly between the tomb and the land of the living. The Ka was the vital force, the life energy that animated the body. It required sustenance, which is why food offerings were left at tombs. The Ak was the transfigured spirit, what the deceased became if they successfully navigated the afterlife and were justified by Osiris. The Ak was luminous, powerful, able to interact with both gods and the living. The name was also essential. As long as a person's name was remembered and spoken, they continued to exist. This is why defacing names on monuments was considered a terrible punishment. It was a form of murder, erasing someone from existence even in the afterlife. The shadow was another component, the silhouette that followed a person, representing their darker nature. When death came, this complex soul began a perilous journey through the Duat. the underworld. The journey through the Duat. The deceased would be wrapped in linen as a mummy, preserving the body so the soul would have something to return to. Magic spells were written on the wrappings and on papyrus scrolls placed in the tomb. These spells, collected in what we call the Book of the Dead, were guides for navigating the underworld. The journey was dangerous. The deceased had to pass through gates guarded by demons, answer riddles correctly, avoid snakes and crocodiles, navigate rivers of fire, climb mountains in darkness. Each obstacle required specific spells and knowledge to overcome. Finally, if the deceased successfully navigated all the perils, they came to the Hall of Two Truths, where Osiris sat in judgment, the weighing of the heart. This was the moment of ultimate importance. The deceased stood before Osiris, king of the underworld, who sat on his throne with the crook and flail, wrapped in white mummy bandages, his skin green like fertile vegetation. Beside Osiris stood the scales of judgment. Anubis, the jackal-headed god, prepared the scales. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, prepared to record the result. The deceased's heart, believed to be the seat of intelligence, emotion and memory, was placed on one side of the scales. On the other side was placed the feather of Maat, the principle of truth and justice. The deceased then had to recite the negative confession, a list of sins they claim not to have committed. I have not killed, I have not stolen, I have not lied, I have not been deaf to words of truth, I have not caused pain, I have not made anyone weep, I have not committed adultery, I have not been hot-tempered, I have not been greedy. 42 declarations in all, one for each of the 42 divine judges present in the hall. As the deceased spoke, the scales moved. If the heart was lighter than the feather, if the deceased had lived according to Maat truthfully and justly, the scales balanced. Osiris would declare them justified, or true of voice. But if the heart was heavy with sin, weighed down by evil deeds and violations of Maat, the scales tipped. And waiting beneath the scales was Ammit, the devourer of the dead, a creature with the head of a crocodile, the front body of a lion, and the back body of a hippopotamus. Ammit would snatch up the heart and devour it, and the deceased would cease to exist entirely. Not pain, not punishment, but complete obliteration, the second death. But for those who passed the judgment, for those whose hearts were light, a glorious eternity awaited. The Field of Reeds. The justified dead entered the Field of Reeds, also called the Field of Aru. This was paradise, a perfect version of Egypt, where the Nile always flooded at the right time, where harvests were always abundant, where there was no pain, no suffering, no death. The deceased would have a house, fields to tend, though the work was easy and joyful, not burdensome. Family reunited with them. They could feast, make love, play games, enjoy music and dancing. Everything good about life continued forever. They could also visit the living world as spirits, watching over their descendants, accepting offerings at their tombs, providing guidance in dreams. This was why mummification was so important, why tombs were filled with goods, why elaborate rituals were performed. The Egyptians were preparing for eternity, ensuring that the transition from life to afterlife would be successful. And Osiris, who had died and been resurrected, who had overcome death through the love of Isis and the magic of the gods, guaranteed this promise. Every person who died essentially reenacted Osiris's death and resurrection. Every justified soul became an Osiris, sharing in his victory over death. Death was not the end. It was a new beginning, the doorway to eternal life. Let this peaceful vision of eternity carry you into deep, restful sleep. There is no fear, only peace. The divine family tree continued to branch and grow, with gods marrying, having children, forming complex relationships that mirrored human families but on a cosmic scale. Horus and Hathor. After Horus claimed his throne, he he married Hathor, the goddess of joy, love, and beauty. Their marriage united the fierce warrior aspect of Horus with the nurturing, celebratory nature of Hathor. Together they represented the ideal divine couple: strength and tenderness, order and joy. From their union came several children, including Ihi, the god of music and joy, often depicted as a child with a sistrum, a sacred rattle. He represented the happiness that comes from a loving union. The four sons of Horus also had four sons: Imseti, Duamutef, Hapi, not the Nile god, and Kebesenuef. These four gods had a crucial role in the afterlife. They protected the internal organs that were removed during mummification and placed in canopic jars. Imseti, human-headed, protected the liver. Duamutef, jackal-headed, protected the stomach. Hapi, baboon-headed, protected the lungs. Kebesenuef, falcon-headed, protected the intestines. These four brothers were painted on the sides of coffins, guarding the deceased from four directions, ensuring safe passage through the underworld. The children of Isis. Besides Horus, Isis had other roles and relationships in various traditions. She was the devoted wife, the protective mother, but also the powerful magician who commanded respect and fear. There is a famous story about how Isis became the most powerful magician in existence. Ra, the sun god, had grown very old. He drooled as he walked, and his saliva fell to the earth. Isis collected this divine saliva and mixed it with earth, forming a serpent. She placed this serpent on the path Ra walked each day. When Ra passed by, the serpent bit him. Ra, who had created everything that existed, had never experienced pain before. He screamed in agony. The poison burned through him like fire. He called all the gods to help him, but none could ease his pain. Finally, Isis came to him. "I can heal you," she said, "but only if you tell me your true name." In Egyptian magic, knowing someone's true name gave you power over them. Ra had many names, but his true name, his secret name given to him at creation, was the source of his power. He had never told it to anyone. The pain was unbearable. Ra tried to resist, tried to give Isis other names, but the poison continued to burn. Finally, desperate, he agreed. He spoke his true name into Isis's ear, transferring his power to her. Isis immediately healed Ra, removing the poison. But now she possessed knowledge that made her the equal of the sun god himself. She became the most powerful magician in existence, second only to Ra in authority. This story explained Isis's supremacy among goddesses. She was not just a devoted wife and mother, she was a goddess who could command even the king of the gods. The family of Set, despite his exile to Ra's bark, still had worshippers and associations. In some periods, particularly in the desert regions and among those who travelled dangerous paths, Set was honoured as a protector. His strength and ferocity could be turned to good purposes, protecting caravans from bandits, giving courage to soldiers, defending against foreign invaders. Set's wife Nephthys was a more ambiguous figure. She had been loyal to Isis during the search for Osiris's body, but she was still married to Set. In some stories she had a son with Osiris, Anubis, making the family relationships even more complex. The Egyptians did not simplify their gods into clear categories of good and evil. Set was dangerous and chaotic, but he was also necessary and powerful. Nephthys was associated with death and mourning, but also with protection and loyalty. The gods contained multitudes just as humans do. Your breathing is so slow now, so deep. You are barely holding on to consciousness, let it go. One of the most distinctive aspects of Egyptian religion was the association of gods with specific animals. This was not mere symbolism. For the Egyptians, certain animals were physical manifestations of divine power. The sacred bulls, the Apis bull, was the living manifestation of Ptah. A specific bull, chosen for particular markings, was kept in Memphis and treated as a god incarnate. When the Apis bull died, all Egypt mourned, and a search began for the new Apis bull, the successor who would carry Ptah's spirit. Similarly, the Nervis bull represented Re, and the Butchis bull represented Montu, the war god. These animals lived in luxury, had their own temples and priests, and were buried with honours when they died. The sacred cats were sacred to Bastet, as we've mentioned, but they were also generally revered throughout Egypt. Killing a cat, even accidentally, was a serious crime that could be punishable by death. When a household cat died, the family would shave their eyebrows in mourning. Cats were often mummified and buried with honour. This reverence came partly from practical considerations. Cats protected grain stores from mice and rats, but it went deeper. Cats were seen as mystical, as creatures that could see into the spiritual realm. Their nocturnal nature, their luminous eyes in darkness, their graceful power all suggested divine connection, the sacred ibis and baboon. These were associated with Thoth, god of wisdom. The ibis, with its long curved beak used for probing the mud for food, seemed to be searching for hidden knowledge. The baboon, intelligent and expressive, seemed to possess understanding beyond ordinary animals. Millions of ibises and baboons were mummified and buried at Thoth's cult centre at Hermopolis. Archaeological excavations have found vast catacombs filled with these mummified offerings, the sacred crocodile. Sobek's sacred crocodiles lived in temple pools fed by priests adorned with gold jewellery and precious stones. They were dangerous, yes, but they were also divine. To be killed by a sacred crocodile was considered a blessing, an honour, a direct touch from the god. The sacred scarab. The scarab beetle, Khepri, was associated with Ra and the concept of resurrection. The Egyptians observed scarab beetles rolling balls of dung and did not realise these balls contained eggs. They thought the beetles spontaneously generated from the dung balls. This seemed to mirror how Ra rolled the sun across the sky and how new life could emerge from death. Scarabs became powerful protective amulets. They were carved from stone and inscribed with spells. The heart scarab, placed over the heart of a mummy, was inscribed with a spell commanding the heart not to testify against the deceased during judgment. This intimate connection between gods and animals made Egyptian religion unique. The divine was not just abstract or distant. It walked on 4 legs, swam in the Nile, flew overhead, lived alongside humanity in physical form. Sleep deeper now, your mind filled with sacred creatures moving through ancient temples. Egyptian religion was not just about myths of the distant past. The gods were active every single day, and their activities structured the rhythm of Egyptian life. Morning. Each dawn, Ra was reborn from Nut's body. The sun appeared on the eastern horizon, golden and new. This was Khepri, the scarab aspect of Ra, the morning sun, young and fresh. In temples across Egypt, priests performed the morning ritual. They would open the shrine containing the god statue, which had been sealed and dark all night. They would wash the statue, anoint it with oils, dress it in fresh linen, apply makeup, and offer it food and drink. Bread, beer, meat, fruits, vegetables. This ritual ensured the god was fed, clothed, and honoured. In return, the god would maintain Mayat, keeping cosmic order intact for another day. Midday. As the sun climbed to its zenith, Ra was in his full power. This was Ra-Harakti. Ra combined with Horus of the horizon, the sun at its strongest and most glorious. This was the time of greatest activity in Egypt. Farmers worked in the fields, craftsmen worked in their workshops, scribes worked in their offices. All activity was blessed by Ra's light and warmth. Evening. As the sun descended toward the western horizon, Ra became Atum, the old man, the setting sun. He was tired from his journey, preparing to descend into the underworld. Nut opened her mouth in the west and swallowed the sun. Ra entered the Duat, the underworld, beginning his perilous 12-hour journey through the realm of the dead. Night. The 12 hours of night corresponded to 12 regions of the Duat. Each hour had its own dangers, its own demons and monsters to be overcome. In the first hour, Ra entered the underworld and was greeted by the spirits of the dead. In the second hour, he sailed through the fields of Aru, where the blessed dead lived. In the third hour, he began to encounter more dangerous regions. In the seventh hour, Ra faced his greatest enemy, Apophis, the Chaos Serpent. Apophis was enormous, stretching across the entire width of the underworld. Each night, Apophis tried to swallow Ra to end the sun's journey, to plunge the world into eternal darkness and chaos. But Set, standing at the prow of the solar bark, fought Apophis with his great spear. Set's violent nature, his chaos energy, was used to fight an even greater chaos. He speared Apophis, driving the serpent back, allowing Ra to pass. Sometimes Apophis succeeded in swallowing Ra, at least partially. This was a solar eclipse, a terrifying event that the Egyptians understood as Apophis's temporary victory. But the gods would always fight to free Ra, and the sun would emerge again. In the 12th hour, just before dawn, Ra approached the eastern horizon. He was rejuvenated by his journey, made young again. He emerged from Nut's body as Khepri, the scarab, and the cycle began anew. This daily journey was a metaphor for death and resurrection. Just as Ra died each evening and was reborn each morning, so too could humans die and be reborn in the afterlife. The sun's daily cycle gave hope and structure to Egyptian cosmology. The annual cycle. Beyond the daily cycle, there were annual festivals marking key moments in the agricultural and religious year. The most important was the Opet festival in Thebes, during which statues of Amun, Mut and Khonsu were carried in procession from Karnak temple to Luxor temple. The pharaoh participated, renewing his divine mandate to rule. The festival lasted for weeks, with feasting, music and celebration. The Wepet Renpet festival marked the new year, coinciding with the annual flooding of the Nile. This was when Sirius, the dog star, first appeared in the sky just before dawn, a celestial event that predicted the flood's arrival. The new year was a time of renewal, of washing away the old and beginning fresh. The mysteries of Osiris reenacted the death and resurrection of Osiris. Participants would mourn his death, search for his body, celebrate his resurrection. These dramatic performances helped the people connect with the divine story, ensuring the cycles of nature would continue. Let these cycles, daily, annual, eternal, carry you into the deepest rest. All is rhythm, all is pattern, all is peace. Egyptian religion was not static. Over 3,000 years of Egyptian civilization, the gods evolved, merged, transformed. New gods appeared, old gods changed roles, foreign gods were adopted and adapted, the rise of Amun. In the Old Kingdom, Ra of Heliopolis was supreme, but during the Middle Kingdom, Amun, a relatively minor god of Thebes, began to rise in importance. When Theban pharaohs unified Egypt and established the New Kingdom, Amun became the state god. Amun merged with Ra, becoming Amun-Ra, combining the hidden power of Amun, whose name means the hidden one, with the solar power of Ra. This combined deity became the king of the gods, the most powerful force in the cosmos. The temple of Karnak, dedicated to Amun, became the wealthiest and most powerful religious institution in Egypt. Its priests wielded enormous influence, sometimes rivaling the pharaoh's power. The monotheistic experiment. During the 18th dynasty, Pharaoh Akhenaten attempted a radical religious revolution. He declared that Aten, the sun disk, was the one true god, and he tried to suppress worship of all other gods. For about 17 years, Egypt officially became monotheistic. Akhenaten moved the capital to a new city, Akhetaten, modern Amarna, dedicated to Aten. He closed temples, erased the names of other gods from monuments, especially Amun's name, but the experiment failed. After Akhenaten's death, his son Tutankhamun restored the old religion. Amun returned to supremacy. Akhenaten's city was abandoned, his memory cursed, his monuments destroyed. The traditional polytheism resumed, and Akhenaten became known as the heretic pharaoh. Foreign gods. As Egypt interacted with neighbouring cultures through trade, war and immigration, foreign gods were sometimes adopted. Astarte and Anat, Semitic warrior goddesses, were worshipped in Egypt. Bes, while originally Egyptian, had connections to African deities. The Egyptians were relatively tolerant religiously. They could accept that other peoples had other gods, and sometimes those gods had power and wisdom worth incorporating. This flexibility allowed Egyptian religion to remain vibrant and relevant over millennia. The late period and syncretism. As Egypt came under foreign rule, Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Egyptian religion evolved further. When Alexander the Great conquered Egypt, his successors, the Ptolemaic dynasty, blended Greek and Egyptian religion. Serapis was created as a Greco-Egyptian deity, combining aspects of Osiris and Apis with Greek gods like Zeus and Hades. Temples were built in a mixed architectural style. Greek philosophers studied Egyptian wisdom. Isis became popular throughout the Mediterranean world. Her cult spread to Greece, Rome, even as far as Britain. She was seen as a universal goddess, mother of all, the embodiment of divine feminine power. Her temples were among the last pagan temples to function, well into the Christian era. The end of the old gods. Eventually, as Christianity spread through the Roman Empire, the ancient gods faded. In 391 CE, Roman Emperor Theodosius I ordered all pagan temples closed. The Temple of Isis at Philae, the last functioning temple of the ancient Egyptian religion, was closed around 550 CE. After 3,000 years, the old gods fell silent. Their temples crumbled, their priests died without successors, their rituals ceased. The hieroglyphic script, which had recorded their stories for millennia, was forgotten. For over 1,000 years, the gods slept in silence. Their names were unspoken. Their stories were lost, buried under sand and time, but they were not gone forever. Your eyes are closed now. Your mind is drifting. The ancient gods rest, and so do you. In 1799, French soldiers in Egypt, part of Napoleon's military campaign, discovered a stone near the town of Rosetta. It was inscribed with text in 3 scripts: ancient Greek, Demotic, late Egyptian, and hieroglyphics. The Rosetta Stone, as it came to be known, would be the key to unlocking Egyptian civilization. For years, scholars had puzzled over hieroglyphics. The elegant pictures carved on monuments were clearly writing, but no one alive could read them. The knowledge had been lost for 1,400 years, but the Rosetta Stone contained the same text in 3 scripts. Using the Greek text, which scholars could read, they could begin to decipher the hieroglyphics. Jean-François Champollion, a French scholar, finally cracked the code in 1822. He realised that hieroglyphics were not just pictures representing ideas, but a mixed system. Some signs represented sounds, some represented concepts, some did both. Suddenly, 3,000 years of Egyptian history and religion could be read again. The temples began to speak. The tombs revealed their secrets. The gods were remembered once more. Throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, archaeologists excavated Egypt systematically. They found the tomb of Tutankhamun, virtually intact, filled with treasures that stunned the world. The pyramid texts carved inside Old Kingdom pyramids, containing the oldest religious writings in the world. The coffin texts and books of the dead, guides to the afterlife painted on coffins and papyrus. The temples of Karnak, Luxor, Abu Simbel, and hundreds of others, testaments to Egyptian architectural genius and religious devotion. The workers' village at Deir el-Medina, where the tomb builders lived, giving insights into daily life and personal religion. And countless monuments, statues, papyri and artifacts that together painted a picture of one of humanity's greatest civilizations. The gods were known again: Ra, Osiris, Isis, Horus, Thoth, Anubis. Their names were spoken, their stories retold. Museums filled with Egyptian artifacts. Books were written, documentaries were made. Ancient Egypt captured the modern imagination. And in a sense, the gods lived again, not as objects of worship, but as cultural memory, as inspiration, as symbols that still resonate with profound meaning. The phoenix, reborn from ashes, the scarab, emerging from the ball of dung, Ra, resurrected each dawn. The Egyptians understood that death was not final, that endings could become beginnings. Their gods have proven them right. After 1400 years of silence, they speak again. After being forgotten, they are remembered. The story that began in the waters of Nun continues even now. Let this cycle of death and rebirth, ending and beginning, carry you into the deepest, most peaceful sleep. What can we learn from the Egyptian gods today? What wisdom did the ancient Egyptians, gazing at the stars over the Nile, offer to us across the millennia? The importance of Ma'at. The central concept of Egyptian ethics was Ma'at, truth, justice, balance, order. The universe was not chaos but cosmos, order maintained through right action. Every person had the responsibility to uphold Ma'at in their own lives. This meant speaking truth, acting justly, maintaining balance in all things. Not hoarding wealth while others starved, not using power to oppress, not lying or cheating, living with integrity, honour and compassion. In our modern world, the concept of Ma'at still resonates. We still struggle with questions of justice, balance, truth. We still recognise that individual actions affect the larger order. The Egyptian emphasis on Ma'at reminds us that ethics are not arbitrary rules, but fundamental principles that maintain the fabric of society and cosmos. Death is not the end. The Egyptian obsession with the afterlife came from a profound hope. Death is a transition, not an ending. Love survives death. Identity survives death. The essential self continues. This belief shaped how Egyptians lived. They lived with awareness of mortality, but not fear of it. They prepared carefully for death because they believed it was a doorway, not a wall. They treated the dead with reverence because they believed the dead could still see, hear, and act. Whether or not we believe in an Egyptian-style afterlife, the underlying wisdom remains. Death is part of life, not its opposite. How we face death shapes how we live. Preparing for endings helps us appreciate beginnings. The power of resurrection. Osiris's story, death, dismemberment, resurrection, is one of the oldest resurrection narratives in human culture. It taught that terrible suffering and apparent finality could be overcome, that love and magic could restore what seemed lost forever. This story offered hope to every Egyptian. If Osiris could die and be resurrected, so could they. Every person who died became an Osiris, participating in the god's victory over death. The theme of resurrection appears in many later religions and philosophies. The Egyptian version, with its emphasis on the power of love, Isis's devotion, the importance of proper ritual, mummification, and the possibility of transformation through death, influenced countless later traditions. The divine is present. For the Egyptians, the sacred was not distant or abstract. It was present in the Nile's flooding, in the sun's daily journey, in sacred animals, in the pharaoh, in temples, even in household shrines. Every aspect of life had divine dimensions. This sense of the sacred immanent in the world encouraged reverence for nature, respect for animals, attention to ritual, and awareness that every action occurred in a cosmos filled with divine presence. The value of wisdom, Thoth, with his ibis head, represented the Egyptian respect for knowledge, wisdom, literacy, and magic. The Egyptians were among the first people to develop writing, mathematics, medicine, and systematic theology. They believed that knowledge was power. magical power, practical power, moral power. Education was highly valued. Scribes who could read and write held privileged positions. The wisdom literature of ancient Egypt, instructions for right living, emphasized learning, self-control, and thoughtful action. Complexity over simplicity. The Egyptian pantheon was vast and complex. Gods had multiple forms, merged with each other, had contradictory myths. This wasn't confusion, it was sophistication. The Egyptians understood that truth is multifaceted, that different perspectives can all be valid, that mystery is part of divinity. They didn't demand that everything fit into neat categories. Set was both defender of Ra and murderer of Osiris. Sekhmet was both destroyer and healer. The gods contained contradictions because reality contains contradictions. This tolerance for complexity and ambiguity is a valuable lesson for our time, when we often demand simple answers to complicated questions. You're so deeply relaxed now, at peace with complexity, with mystery, with the ancient wisdom flowing through you. And so we come to the end of our journey through the origin of the Egyptian gods. Though like the Nile, like the sun, like the cycle of death and rebirth, it is an ending that is also a beginning. We have travelled from the primordial waters of Nun to the rediscovery of Egyptian civilization in modern times. We have witnessed the emergence of Atum from chaos, the birth of Shu and Tefnut, the separation of earth and sky, the birth of Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. We have witnessed the murder of Osiris, the grief and determination of Isis, the resurrection through love and magic. We have seen Horus avenge his father and claim his rightful throne. We have explored the vast pantheon of Egyptian deities, each with their own character, their own domain, their own wisdom to offer. We have learned about the daily journey of Ra through sky and underworld, the weighing of the heart in the hall of judgment, the paradise of the field of reeds waiting for those who lived justly. We have seen how Egyptian religion evolved over 3 millennia, how it eventually faded, and how it was rediscovered and brought back to light. The ancient Egyptians are gone now. The last person who worshipped these gods as living realities died 15 centuries ago. The temples are ruins. The priests are dust. The great civilization that built the pyramids and carved the hieroglyphs has faded into memory. But the gods remain, not as powers that answer prayers or demand sacrifice, but as stories that still resonate, as symbols that still convey meaning, as windows into how our ancestors understood the great mysteries of existence. When you see the sun rise tomorrow morning, remember it is Ra being born anew from the body of Nut. When you see the stars at night, remember they are the body of the sky goddess arching over the earth. When you face grief, remember Isis searching for the pieces of her beloved. When you face injustice, remember Horus fighting for his birthright. When you face death, remember Osiris, who died and was resurrected, who promises that death is not the end. The old gods of Egypt sleep now in the museums and in the ruins, in the pages of books and the memories of those who study them. They sleep, but they also wait. They wait in the human heart, in our continuing questions about meaning and justice, life and death, chaos and order. And you, dear listener, you too are drifting now towards sleep. Your breathing is slow and deep. Your body is completely relaxed. Your mind is quiet, filled with images of ancient temples and eternal rivers, of gods with the heads of animals and the wisdom of ages. Sleep now, as the gods sleep. Dream of the field of reeds, where the harvest is always abundant, where the sun always shines, where there is no pain or fear. Dream of the solar bark sailing through the night, protected by Set's spear against the chaos serpent. Dream of the scales of judgment, where your heart is weighed and found light, pure, true. Sleep peacefully. The night is simply the sun's journey through the underworld. The morning will come, Ra will be reborn, and so will you, refreshed and renewed. The gods watch over your sleep. Isis spreads her wings protectively. Anubis guides you safely through the darkness. Thoth records your dreams in his book of wisdom. Hathor fills your sleep with peace and gentle joy. All is Ma'at, all is order, all is well. Sleep now, the ancient story is complete, the eternal cycle continues, and you rest in the embrace of gods as old as civilization itself. Good night.